leadership is only hard for good leaders because you have to do all this work.
Oh, yeah.
It's lonely and it's selfless. And one of my favorite leadership mantras is when something goes wrong, accept all the blame, and when everything goes right, give away all the credit. And I can tell when somebody's a good leader in a class because some of them will go, yep, that's right, that's right, that's right. Some of them will be like, that's stupid. And they don't want to do that. To be blunt, older generation leaders say, I don't want to have to be their mom or dad. But great leaders really understand what an honor that is. Younger generation look to you as not their mom or dad, but a mentor and someone they feel safe and comfortable with to be able to fail, because any good parent helps their child feel safe enough to grow, and a good leader does the same thing.
You're listening to The Revenue Vault, where we architect bulletproof revenue engines with the leaders who dominate their quotas. Hey, I'm Marcus Shen, CEO of Venly, and I'm obsessed with systems that scale performance. Now, today's guest is Frank Ziede, a leadership performance coach who's trained teams at Tesla, BMW, Rivian, Colgate, and so many more. We dissect his leader versus manager versus boss framework that transforms toxic cultures, the $8.8 trillion cost of disengaged employees, and why the Marshmallow Test reveals your hiring blind spots. Frank shares his power methodology for authentic communication, explains why companies that hire slow and fire fast crush their competition. Plus, we go into the counterintuitive reason why cutting training budgets during tough times actually destroys your revenue per employee. And Frank's whisper is a shout principle that makes teams perform without micromanaging. Let's head to the vault. So Frank, you have worked and trained with some of the biggest brands in the world. I mean, I was looking at Colgate, Tesla, BMW, Rivian, Coach, and like tons more. And you have said leadership is only hard for good leaders.
Yeah.
What exactly makes it hard even for really good leaders, and how do they move past these hurdles?
So let me tell you where I got that quote from. It was on a t-shirt, and the actual quote said, parenting is only hard for good parents. And I remember seeing the shirt, and I am a parent of a 15-year-old who's neurodivergent, and he struggles in those things. And I was like, man, that is so true. If parenting is easy for bad parents because you don't care enough, you just sort of say, yeah, go outside, handle yourself, do whatever you're going to do. Or you dominate the child and you're like, man, you shut your mouth and do what I say, and blah, 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 right? And so it made sense there. But then I do so many leader trainings and leadership conversations. And I was like, man, that's the exact same thing that, leadership is only hard for good leaders because you have to do all this work.
Oh, yeah.
It's lonely and it's selfless. And, one of my favorite leadership mantras is when something goes wrong, accept all the blame, and when everything goes right, give away all the credit. And I can tell when somebody's a good leader in a class because some of them will go, yep, that's right, that's right, that's right. Some of them will be like, that's stupid. And they don't want to do that. So it's very selfless. And that's where that phrase came from. Shout out to whoever came out with the t-shirt. But I was like, and the other thing, I have so many, to be blunt, older generation leaders who say this phrase to me. I don't want to have to be their mom or dad. My employee is my employee. I always think of Don Draper in Mad Men when someone's like, you don't ever give me credit. And he's like, that's what the money is for. But great leaders really understand what an honor that is and a blessing it is for someone of a younger generation to look to you as not their mom or dad, but a mentor and someone they feel safe with and comfortable with to be able to fail, because any good parent helps their child feel safe enough to grow, and a good leader does the same thing.
So how do you make that shift then, right? I think even regardless of generation, I see there's some account executives who want to go into leadership roles like, oh, I don't want to do it. I don't want to be a babysitter, right? And then these can be young AEs. Then you have maybe people who are leaders. They're like, oh, I don't like leadership, or, man, it feels like I'm just babysitting all the time.
Yeah.
How do they make that shift in that mindset to really embrace what it really means to be a great leader?
So there's an activity that I created back, 5-6 years ago called leader versus manager versus boss. And so the very first thing I have them do is, typically we do trainings in person, 12 to 24 people at a time. And we bring them together and we say, okay, let's get your opinion, because my opinion is third party. It's not what you want. Your own opinion convinces yourself. How can you compel yourself to believe your own information? And so I say, give me a list of what describes a leader and what describes a manager. And they get very specific very quickly. Leader is hands-off, a manager is hands-on. A leader is empowering, where a manager is micromanaging. A leader leads by example. A manager says, do what I say, not what I do. And so I pause for a second, and they may be aware of it or may not, but they are really establishing that a leader leads people, the manager manages things. So the mantra that I want them to come out of that with is people first, product or process second. And so if you're putting the product and process first, it means you're putting your people second. That means, just like you said, micromanaging or, all those things. And I have to babysit people. That's not what leadership is about. But the third part of that is the word boss. So they've really made a clear distinction between these two things. And I was like, all right, define the term boss. And boy, they lay into me with like a broadsword. They're like, shitty, terrible, aggressive, blunt, harsh, diminishing, insulting, opinionated, aggressive, just terrible. And when I'm a big fan of etymology of words, like the origin of them. Leader comes from Latin, which is, I think, Old English, which the definition means a guide. Manager, I didn't look that one up. I should look that one up while we're talking. The other one was boss, and boss is like an old Dutch word, baas, and it means master. And so I think by putting an activity in front of people, experiential learning is the best type of learning. Participant-driven discovery of information is so much better than teaching from a lecturer, at the front of the room. And so these people, they see this clear distinction, and nobody wants to be a boss.
That's right.
But they're doing boss-like things. And everybody wants to be a leader, but they don't want to have to do the hard work of what leadership is. So instead of speaking at them, I just asked them to discuss it on their own. The one thing that stuck out with me from a recent class I did in Florida with Southeast Toyota, I said to them, how many of you have had great leaders? Very few hands went up. This is like 65 people. And I said, how many of you have had bosses? 80% of the hands went up. And so I said, you're all, quote, leaders in training at all time. Even if you don't have the position, what I call leaderships and leader in title, but if you're a leader in training, you're all learning what you either do or don't want to be as a leader when you get the title. And a lot of these people are learning so much more about what they don't want to do than what they do want to become when they get the title. So I don't know if that answered your question in the long way we got there.
Well, I think at the end of the day, right, I think that there's a lot of power in helping them increase their own self-awareness of what they perceive to be those words. I think generally speaking, people perceive boss as a negative connotation. Like for instance, I have a couple people on my team, they're from overseas, so they don't understand the etymology of certain words. So they just like to call me boss. And it actually bothers me. I actually told them, like, don't call me. I actually feel very weird when you call me that.
Yeah.
It feels like this like master, like slave feel, which is like not the feeling I want from like my own company culture, right?
Yeah.
But they're kind of stuck to that word, right? Because they see it as, hey, it's just because I report to you. That's how it is. They don't see it as a bad thing, but I'm like, but I see it as a bad thing, culturally. I think it's very, very tough. So let's just say, for example, let's just say you're a CRO, Chief Revenue Officer.
Yeah.
And you look and you have multiple layers of leadership, right? So you have sales VPs, you have managers, you have directors, and, if they were to look at their organization, they're like, man, like I just seem to have a lot of these. They're actually, they act more like managers and bosses. Like, what can they do as a leader themselves that oversees a hierarchy of other leaders? Yeah. What could they do to start working on shifting that culture?
I think that you made a post. We just talked about this yesterday or the day before, about when you got the role. And I can tell this because you put it on LinkedIn.
100%.
You said, I went in and I said, all right, I'm going to take charge. Here I go. And I'm the top salesperson for the last 10 months. So everybody should do what I do the way I do it. And your significant other, when you came home, because they didn't respond well to that, said, that's not a good approach. Maybe you should ask them what they think. What we do in training is no different than what's going on in business. Participation. What is the participant learning on their own? Never do for a participant what they could and should do for themselves. And so when I think about this, 9 times out of 10, that's not a scientific number, but in my experience, there are many people who get a leadership position because they were the top performer.
Yeah.
And they're not given the necessary tools to understand what coaching, mentoring, and leadership is all about. They just were the top performer. Now lead other people to be their version of a top performer. But they step in and they go, well, then everybody's got to be like me. I was number one. I know you don't do it as good as I do it. And that's why you got to do it the way I do it. That's problematic. You're not leading. You're basically becoming a dictator. You're saying, finish these phrases, my way or the highway,
My
right?
way, right.
Take it or
leave it.
Leave it. Yeah, everybody knows them. And so, I this is a totally indulgent promotion, but train your people on what leadership looks like. Instill the opportunity for them to engage with written material, video material, have instructor-led courses, mentor them. One person said the best thing I could do for a new hire is have them shadow a person. I was like, no, that's shadowing their job description.
That's right.
That is not leading that person or coaching that person in the right way. So I would say, have a clear understanding of what leadership is or isn't for your team, your culture. Culture is something that is thrown around all the different, this way on that way on LinkedIn. I just did a scrolling video the other day of all the LinkedIn posts on TikTok and leadership posts. And everybody's like, leadership is this and leadership is that. The reason why everybody's got to try to talk about it so much is because it's in short supply.
100%.
So we just find a way to establish a clear definition of what leadership should be and what it should look like. And I would say the big thing that I've had to teach a lot of leaders is destigmatize failure. Find a way to let these people who are now in these leadership positions to realize, like, here's you. Okay, let's say that Marcus is the head of our company, which is, you're the CEO of, there you go. And so now I'm below you. I'm that next person on the ladder, one rung down. I need to feel from you that it's okay for me as the manager of a team of 5 that my team fails. They're going to stumble. They're going to do something that's problematic. I heard Tom Peters do a quote that said, reward epic failures, punish mediocre successes. Growth only comes from failure. And you're going to have a stumble. So if you can destigmatize that, then I can work with my team and I don't have to be so bullish and harsh on people. And I say, hey, I saw what you did there. You made us stumble. Talk to me about how you think we can adjust this. And then the leader comes in at the end and goes, now I have the strategy. Here's the different thing. So long answer. But if you look at Donald Miller at StoryBrand, his whole thing is you're the guide. Any leader is a guide. You're Gandalf, you're Yoda. Your people are Leia or Luke Skywalker. They have to be the hero of the story. And how would it be ridiculous if Obi-Wan was the one that went in and solved all the problems and Luke just got to tag along, So make your people the hero of the story. You're just the guide. That's leadership 101.
Well, I love that so much, right? Because it's so critical, right? Because especially when someone goes from like an individual contributor to a leadership role, it's such a different focus. They go from themselves being the hero. Now they're like, oh, I need to take a step back and be that guide. Now, and I think it makes a lot of sense, right? You get someone new. If you take over an organization, you have to like develop them. Okay, maybe my team they're not literally leaders. I'm going to bring someone like you in. I'm going to bring people in. I'm going to help give them resources, train, and make them better, right? From your stance, what about people that like, 'cause I think sometimes like when you think about it, when you have a new leader and like once they're in the role and you wait too long to develop them, it's like they already got some bad habits you got to break, and you may not be able to break them, right? So, in your opinion, what can organizations do proactively prepare people for those type of roles, whether they're jumping from like I see an individual contributor to a manager to a director, and so on to them until a point they have like they're running the whole org.
So most organizations, they hire very quickly and they fire very slowly. So they're keeping around the bad apples or the people who are unable to change. Every organization should hire incredibly slowly and then fire very quickly. And it shouldn't be a problem to fire quickly because you've refined your pick to add to the team. I think of Charlie Kim at NextJump, which is a software company that had a lifetime hiring policy. And if you got a job with them, you had a job for life. And if you decided to quit, they would help you find your new job. Obviously, if there's any ethical or legal situation, there's a contract. But if you stumbled in a role, you didn't, I think you're in sales all the time, right? And so if you didn't hit a sales quota, they didn't look at that as well. You're on the out.
We're out. Yeah.
No, at NextJump, they'd be like, fantastic. This is an area of opportunity. Let's go to work. But they only can do that because they hire so incredibly slowly. I had one manager who said, what if I sit down with the person for an interview and I can, in 5 minutes, 2 minutes, I can tell they're not a good fit. I said, well, then you should take your hand and you should ball it up and you should punch yourself in the face because it's your fault that this has happened. You could have done so many more interviews via LinkedIn, or I mean, not LinkedIn, but Zoom or Teams. You could have done emails back and forth. You could have had them create videos and send them to you. You have to do this process methodically because when they are on board, now you have to realize, okay, you're locked in. Everyone's like, oh, well, I can fire them. That's so expensive. The cost of turnover is never, ever fully evaluated the way it should be. Background checks, drug tests, the HR staff times and salary for bringing a person on board, then onboarding, whether that's in-person instructor-led training or online training, or how many hours are you paying them for? Then the cost of revenue that wasn't happening when you brought this person on, then they're on. What if they're losing clients for you? And then when they're gone and you fired them, now you have to do that process all over again. And there's lost revenue between the time you let them go and you find the next person. So Southwest Airlines, Trader Joe's, these are brands that don't really do any customer service training because they hire the right person with the right attributes. They go very slowly and they're like, does this person have that sort of innate sense in them that they know what's required? Because I can teach skills. I can teach logistics. But I have to know that they've got that internal wiring the right way to be a part of our team and what we're after. So I would say slow your hiring process. Do you know the Marshmallow Test story?
Oh yeah.
So give me your version of what you know about it.
So the version I know about is this is like, I don't know how many decades ago, right? 1970s, right? The group of researchers brought in a bunch of kids. So I don't remember how old, maybe I call under 10, let's say, for example. And they say, hey, listen, we're going to give you we're going to put a marshmallow in front of each of you. If you can wait 1 hour and not eat it, at the end of the hour, we'll give you 2 marshmallows. And they left the room. And of course, it was being observed, right? They could see what the kids are doing. And the kids were some couldn't could not handle it. They just ate it immediately, right? And some were trying to distract themselves, whatever, right? But ultimately, when they came back in and, some kids had eaten it and some had waited, what they had realized were the kids who had the most delayed self-gratification in the future eventually had more success because they were far better being able to hold off on, getting the dopamine hit right now. That's kind of what I understand in a nutshell.
It's perfect. And there were some scientists about 25 years later who said that doesn't sound right. That somehow your marshmallow choice, it dictates your life. So about 25 years later, another researcher team came in and they exponentially made the group of kids larger. So it was only, I think, about 100 kids in the first test. Now they did like 1,000 kids. And those numbers are off, but it was 5 to 10 times more participants. And when they expanded the size of the group and they looked at the kids, what they found was the difference between why they chose a marshmallow or they chose to wait was a mindset of that kid, either scarcity or abundance. If they had a scarcity mindset, meaning these were kids that socioeconomically did not know when their next meal was going to happen or did not have trust or faith that they were going to have a family structure or home life that was going to be like, hey, if you wait, you'll actually get more. So they got what they could get because it's survival instinct. But the kids who actually waited for the second marshmallow were living in an abundance mindset, typically from better socioeconomic situations, had a structure around them where the safety was happening. And they knew they had this innate sense that if they waited for that second marshmallow, it was going to come because of previous experiences. So what I say to all businesses is, are you in a scarcity or an abundance mindset when you're hiring? Right? If you're in a scarcity mindset, you've got 3 or 4 open desks down there that are almost like rotating doors at the front of a hotel. And that person lasts there only 6 months, 1 year. And you're like, well, let's at least do something now because I don't know when I'm going to get the next person. But if you have an abundance mindset, you're like, hey, we are going to wait because we know that our company's doing the right thing, that our culture is the most important thing, not this quarterly report. Those are always important, but it's people first, product or process second. So if you can wait for the second marshmallow when you're hiring someone, and then do all the onboarding and do all the things that, help them feel even better and better and better. Well, I remember I saw that story the first time. And then a friend of mine, much smarter than me, said, well, here's the actual study 25 years later. And well, that makes perfect sense.
Well, I think it's really powerful when you think about this, right? Because It's easy to say hire slow and fire fast, right? But it's hard in practice,
Totally.
And a lot of times, especially when you're interviewing and hiring, you
Yeah.
get obviously the pressure to obviously fill the open headcount, right? You might lose it, et cetera. But on top of that, there's different things that come into play, like, what I learned was we call like the pick of the litter, right? You kind of like maybe interview like 50 candidates, but like, okay, this is the best one out of all of them. Like, you're like, I think let's just go with them instead, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe it's like, I also learned about what's called the halo effect, where they have like one or two core attributes.
Yeah.
They just kind of outshine everything else, and it helps you. Like, actually, it doesn't force you, but it helps you avoid seeing the red flags you wouldn't normally see. For instance, if you're like, oh, they have this certain, like, they worked at a certain company. Oh, they worked at a Tesla. Oh, you know what? Like, they must be great. But you know what? Tesla also makes mistakes in hiring too. But that empowering of like that background overshines everything else, right? And I think it's really key.
I just wrote that down, that a halo can be blinding. That was awesome.
That's the halo effect, right?
You're like,
that's basically what it is, right? So, let's just say, for example, if you're like, you're interviewing, you're hiring, and you bring somebody in, right?
Yeah.
They, generally speaking, I find even if they're going to be a great future leader, they still need development.
Totally.
What can leaders do to help prepare them? Because sometimes you'll see, you might hire slow, you vet them out, you have multiple people in part of the process, and they come in and like, they're good, but maybe there's a certain behavior still they're not quite there in terms of maybe a more leadership quality. What could a high-level exec do to put in place like a way to onboard and train them to get them more of an actual leader?
Yeah. So great question. And I'm still trying to get over the halo effect thing. That was really, really smart. I could just see somebody and you're just like, it's so blinding. It's so awesome.
I can't take credit. Fast company taught me in our hiring training. I'm like, oh, that's a good point. I've definitely fallen on a mistake.
That's cool. Yeah. I hadn't heard that before.
Yeah.
I think that I'm a big fan of threes. All good things come in threes, right? This is Socrates, like beginning, middle, and end. So the first one there is, when you're a leader, a whisper is a shout. That was from Steven Shedletsky, who was on Simon Sinek's team and wrote a book called Speak Up Culture. Meaning, if you're going to try to get in and give feedback to somebody, you shouldn't be yelling. I don't understand why people still think that yelling is good. I mean, did you ever get yelled out or chewed out by somebody? At the end of it, go, boy, that was great. I really felt like,
how you chew me out. I feel much better. I'm going to choose immediately.
The fact that you did it in front of everybody, I just feel leadership pulsing through me.
Yeah.
The whisper, when your leader, a whisper is a shout. You've got to find a way. And that leads me to the second point on sort of our 3-point journey here, which is seek to understand. Great leaders, they ask questions, and then they ask more questions, and then they ask more questions. That's what any good coach does. That's what a good mentor does. They don't start telling, because telling is not teaching. So when your leader whispers a shout, lower your voice, get softer, get quieter. That's how you maintain authority as a leader. If you see these viral videos of a police officer arresting someone and they're calm and professional, and then, but the suspect is screaming and yelling, wouldn't it be so crazy if the police started screaming, yelling the same thing, the same curse words at each other? And I think everybody watching would be like, that person just lost their authority. Well, I think it's the same way with leaders. You can't go in like a bull in a china shop. You've got to slow down in the process. Slow down, be a little bit quieter, and then ask a bunch of questions. And then the back part of this would be, are you up for the real hard work of accountability? You have to come to a collective understanding of what went wrong, what we're going to fix, how we're going to fix it. And then I can't just say, all right, Marcus, show me what you got. I got to say, all right, I'm going to meet you in 7 days. We're going to check in and we're going to see how this is going. I'm then going to do that for probably the next quarter. So once a week or once a month, we're going to check in and we're going to see how we're moving this needle. And you notice I keep saying these words, we. So how are we going to do this together? We are on this same mission. Jocko Willink, who wrote Extreme Ownership, as a former Navy SEAL, his sort of thing is like, it's your fault too as the manager. This person didn't do this thing. Did you set a clear enough expectation that they shouldn't do that thing? Well, no, but I think everybody's supposed to know that you don't do that. Don't assume that everybody knows that they shouldn't do this or that. They didn't have your life experience. They didn't have your parents or your former bosses. They didn't have your former culture at the last job. Maybe they're new in the workforce. They don't know these things. I saw somebody the other day who sent a resume to a hiring manager, and the resume was 29 pages long.
Wow.
Right? You and I both are like, that is not good.
Wild.
But maybe that person wanted to include letters of recommendation or dissertation that they wrote. But who knows? So don't just assume, how do you not know that that's the wrong thing to do? Well, but stop for a second. Hey, thank you so much for your resume. You ought to ask you a couple of questions. Tell me in detail why you sent such a long, comprehensive email, a resume, when in our industry, typically what we experience is 1 to 2 pages. I'm genuinely curious what your thought process was. And I really do want to hear about it. So it's being curious, being empathetic. And then on the back end, if it's terrible and it's illegal or unethical or just plain stupid, right? Then on the back end, you've earned the right to go, Marcus, I got to tell you, man, it's just not going to work for us. So you need to make this change. And this is how we need to make this change. Instead of, come in my office, got to make this change. You did this wrong. You got it now. Go forth. That's not leadership, man. Like we said at the beginning, leadership is only hard for good leaders. It's easy for the bad.
Powerful. You know, it's interesting is there's a couple things I think we're 100% aligned here. And even as I observed you role playing with me, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, I always focus on this, even from a sales perspective. It's like, you know, whenever we're giving that feedback, you always incorporate what I call the triple T's: your tact, your tone, and your timing. And you intentionally even shifted how you did that role play from a tonality perspective. So it created a comfortable environment to be able to get that feedback. The second point I want to point out, and I love the point you mentioned, which is you say we a lot. And I'm not sure. Have you ever read the book Carrots and Sticks Don't Work by, I think it's Frank Marciano. I could be wrong about the author.
Okay.
So he has a really powerful leadership model. And I read this book years ago, but because I was running pretty large organizations, it actually probably had one of the biggest impacts to how I led across the board. But he had a model called the respect model, right? Okay. And it's an acronym, but also the word too. Because for instance, like obviously you want to respect your people, they want to respect you, and also when your people respect you, they respect your company and leadership. It's amazing, right? But the acronym stood for a few different things, and I'll circle back in a second. But it would be R, recognition. So you want to show recognition. E, empowerment. You want to make sure you empower them, right? S is you want to be supportive to them. P, partnering, and that goes into the W, which is like the we, right? Or not the we, which is like when you partner with your people, even if they're not performing, and you say, hey, listen, so over the next 7 weeks, you and I will sync once a week. We'll take a look at your behavior. We'll work on it together because my job is to help you become successful in your role. Now it's not like, good luck, I'm throwing you to the wolves. It's like, we're in this together. I'm going to take you there. Right.
Yeah.
But I thought it was really, really powerful. And there's other, there's like, I think the other E is expectations, then consideration and trust. But if you do that consistently, it's amazing what happens in a culture, because now you develop employees who will display discretionary effort. And to be specific, discretionary efforts is defined as doing things outside the scope of the role, not because they have to, but because they want to. That actually help move the organization forward. Right. So I think it's like pretty powerful, some of these things that you actually mentioned already. Now, we're going to pivot slightly, right? And typically in tough economic times, people are looking like inflation starting to go up. They're getting all worried and whatnot. Training is often one of the first budgets get cut high to say, Frank, we're not going to bring you in. Marcus not going to bring you and your team in. Like, we're going to be cutting it. We're going to just do it internal. We're not going to do it at all.
Yeah.
Why is that a mistake, do you think? And what are some ways companies can safeguard the training so it doesn't get sacrificed?
I think that it's a long-term approach. You can't look at training as something that's on a spreadsheet. I can show you in the quarterly report that it's going to happen. There's nowhere on there that I'm going to be able to prove in some sort of ROI that this person is more receptive to your leadership style, or that they are going to be more curious about what a customer thinks, or they're going to be able to overcome and have a greater sense of resilience when they get objections with customers, and they're going to be able to stick to itness and dive a little deeper, and then hopefully gain the sale that they're looking for. So if you're looking at your training department, well, when it comes to people, they're not widgets. They're not ones and zeros. I'm sorry, but if that's what you're after, I can't provide it.
Yeah.
But I know training works. And anybody who's been to good training knows it works. How did anybody get to where they are? You read material, or you gathered information, or you were involved in things. So that, I think that it's a survival mentality. It's the scarcity mindset again. Hey, times are tight. Let's cut back on these things. And the very first thing is human investment.
That's it.
Isn't that crazy? I mean, can we cut back on this pizza party, or can we cut back on this, this shipping thing? Like, I don't know what it is, but how is it that when we get a little bit under the thumb of pressure and stress, that the first thing we say is, hey, we got to stop investing in our people?
It's interesting.
Wow.
I think it's so wild to me, right? Because
Yeah.
when you think about it, like, the most elite organizations also measure revenue per employee, right? So they understand how, like, based on how many employees they have, how much revenue per employee, and they're going to always drive that number up, right?
Yeah.
That means like cutting out things that don't make sense and investing in things that actually do increase it, right? And skills are making employees more skilled is like the most powerful thing you can do, because they will generate a far greater return. And I think about it's much like having kids. You have a kid, I have a kid as well. But if we didn't invest in our kid, like well, things are tired. We're not investing in our kid. What's gonna happen to that kid in a couple of years? It's dangerous kind of to start thinking that way, right?
Yeah.
So I think I think you bring up some good points. Now, it's more about leadership, right? What are maybe some common blind spots you see in leaders who want to do the right thing, but they struggle to achieve maybe the emotional engagement with their teams to deploy an initiative that's supposed to be done?
I mean, we have to all understand that we're different. We have to understand that we have different motivations. I deal a lot in training with a behavioral assessment called the DISC behavioral assessment from the Wiley brand. It's a series of 28 questions that helps you figure out, but it's only really assessing two factors: pace and focus. And the reason why I bring that up is I think that's one of the biggest blind spots for human beings. So would you consider yourself, Marcus, fast-paced or more moderate-paced?
Fast-paced.
Right? So you rock and roll.
Yeah.
Your mantra is ready, fire, aim.
Yeah.
There's not a problem with you making a decision. You don't call them mistakes. You call them a decision that was already made, and now it's time for another one.
That's right.
And so if I'm a moderate-paced person, I'm methodical. I'm timely. I need to be left alone. I don't want to be told what to do. Give me the material and leave me alone. So all of a sudden, we might have a crash. We might have a conflict. The other aspect that they put in this behavioral assessment, and there are many out there like Myers-Briggs and the Big Five, but this one is just so simple, and that's why we use it a lot in training with BMW and things. The second thing is your focus. So do you feel like you personally are more logic-focused or more people-focused?
Logic-focused.
Right. So you like checklists and spreadsheets. You're the type, tell me if this is true. Do you ever have a list going and you've already completed something, but you write it down on the list just to cross it off?
100% helps to keep track of everything that has to be done. Right. That's right.
So it's you're about accomplishment, and you're about data. In your world, facts are facts.
That's right.
But my style specifically, I am people focused. So emotion matters to me. I care so much about what other people think, probably to a fault. I need that connection, and I want to be involved, and I want to have a leader that wears the same rose-colored glasses that I do. But if you're in that leadership position, I hate to put it on you again, but your job is to be the adapter. The employee is gonna, be who they are. And the manager has to come over, the leader has to come over and go, okay, how can I adapt to the person that's in front of me? Once again, exhausting, lonely, selfless. But if I know that you, Marcus, are my staff member, and it's this whole golden rule, platinum rule thing. I know it's out there everywhere. Golden rule, treat others the way you want to be treated. Let me try that with you. Marcus, man, hey, what's going on? How are you? It's good to see you, man. Tell me about your child and your kids and life. Yeah, we'll get to the work stuff a little bit later, but I just want to see how you're doing, how you're feeling. This is my golden rule version, by the way.
Yeah.
Because giving you what I would want is how I would want it. So tell me how you're feeling, what's going on in your mind? Like, how did it go with that interaction with your coworker? Yeah, well, let's just take this easy. That's what I want. But platinum rule is treat others the way they want to be treated. So version 2, the modified to Marcus version is, Marcus, thanks for coming in, man. You're killing it. I know that you're one of our top performers for a reason. Got something very specific that I want to talk to you about. It's this item on the checklist. You tell me what's going on with this item on the checklist. Boom, 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 boom. You tell me, because again, I trust your leadership. I know you're out there crushing it on the sales floor. What do you think we need to do to switch this over? Boom, boom, boom. Now your style also likes a little bit of conflict. You're okay with it. So I would be like, well, Marcus, I'm going to challenge you. I don't agree with what you said on point 3. And as the person in the authority position, I need you to get on board with that, because I think you've got what it takes, man. I'm challenging you to compete with yourself and drive yourself to that next level. What do you think about that? Good. Let's do it. I'm going to see you soon. You know exactly what we're after. There's no speculation here. You need anything, you let me know. Otherwise, I'm just going to get the hell out of your way. I'll talk to you in a month. Right. And so that is just so that is painful. That is not how I like to operate.
Sure. Yeah.
But that's so adaptation to the actual employee and something like that, the DISC behavioral assessment, I think can help. So leaders need these tools. I think another one is Gallup Q12.
Yeah.
Your 12 questions from Gallup that you should be asking your staff all day. Do I have the necessary tools to do my job? Do I know what's expected of me at work? Does somebody check in with me on a 7-day basis about my growth within this team? Mm-hmm. These tools help you then go in and start to adapt and modify.
I think it's really powerful. And I love the examples you broke down, right? Because I think one of the greatest things that we can do for ourselves as leaders, or even if we're an individual contributor role, because we're so leader in that sense, is how do we increase our own self-awareness of how we view the world, right? Mm-hmm. That's why I love the DISC, Myers-Briggs, I love, the Enneagram, whatever one you want to do. It's like, sure. They give you a lens kind of look through life, but then also allows you to see, oh, you know what, when I'm working with Frank or somebody else, how can I meet them where they're at?
Yeah.
And it's really hard to meet them where they're at if you're not aware where you're currently at and how you're being perceived,
Yeah. Real quick on any of those systems, I just want to be clear, don't use them as a hiring tool. It could be illegal that you're saying this person isn't a good fit because they're not the style that I think would be right for that role. And it's not about judging anybody else. It's a self-assessment tool to then say, how can I modify? I just want to make sure any leaders out there don't use this thing as a crutch and go, well, that's why they're this bad in this job role because they're this behavioral style. No, it's just, they are who they are. So I appreciate the grace there.
Well, I think it's a great point, Frank, because the other point is let's say if you were, like, aside from it being illegal, if you will, because you're, realistically just, you actually discriminating now against other people, right?
Yeah.
The other point is like, let's say you weren't aware of that, you disregarded that advice. Now all of a sudden you have a bunch of people who are on the same profile. So then you start to lose, you get this echo chamber of like people acting and thinking the same way. You don't get different ways of thinking. Like, I think one of the greatest things I did, especially early on as a young leader, was literally hiring wildly different people from me.
There you go.
Was it really hard for me to learn how to work within those profiles? Yes. But you know what? It actually made me better, but actually made our team overall stronger and better. So like we would have more diverse conversations, more robust problem solving. They would think of things different way, even deal strategy. They'd be like, that's kind of a silly way. Like, and they would kind of share maybe like a softer perspective. Like, oh, that's a good point because I'm a hard D. Like I'm ready.
Right.
I'm ready to like break through. Right. And I'm like, that's a good point. Maybe I need to be more careful. And I think this also applies to even parenting. Right.
Totally.
Like how are we showing up as parents to our kids? It's the same thing, and I'm reading a new parenting book right now. It's kind of the same thing. I'm like, ooh, I'm a little bit like this. Actually, I need to be a little more careful with how my approach is. I'm bringing some of that intensity, which does not always work well, with the kiddo. Right. So I think it's really interesting.
And on that point, like there are so many people who, let's just be real blunt, didn't have great parents.
Yeah.
So, or didn't have a parent.
Yeah.
So if we're learning so much about parenting from our parents, then we go out into the world and we use parenting sort of as a leadership mantra. Maybe that's not the right strategy.
Totally.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh no! I mean, it's a lot like you probably read the book, the 5 love languages, right? It's very
I know of it, haven't read it,
but essentially it's like each person has their own love language, or even in the workplace, their own appreciation language is how it's redefined, right? So it's like if I'm speaking Chinese and my employee speaks Japanese, there's a disconnect, right?
Yeah.
If I can understand their language and I can now speak their language, then they're going to be, the messaging is clearer and we feel more connected. And it's not about compliance, but then they're probably going to be more open to the change that I'm wanting them to do, right? And that's why, influence really is an ongoing thing at all times. So let's talk about your upcoming book. It's called Giving a Shit. Is that what it is? Giving a Shit? Is that
Lost Art of Giving a Shit?
The Lost Art of Giving a Shit. Cool.
Like customer service actually pays.
Awesome. So what does that look like in practice, especially for like a large organization?
Sure. I think it's, I've done my job for about 25 years now, and I started working on it during COVID because I had time on my hands. And many people said, well, what's the title? And I say, well, it's called The Lost Art of Giving a Shit. And I've had multiple managers, department heads, clients stop me and go, whoa, that's exactly what I need. And they have this whole, what they feel are just people who don't care anymore about their jobs. And I feel for me, it's just this line in the sand moment where I want to put out to people, you got to make a choice. So there are 5 sections in the book. Either you do or you don't give a shit. It's okay. Be honest about it. If you don't, figure out why. There are a lot of benefits to doing this. And if you are disengaged, that means you might be dealing with some trauma or depression, or you'll want to give a shit. Trust me. The 4th section, third, I've got my fingers all screwed up. Either you do or you don't, right? If you don't figure out why you should. So that's a whole section filled with scientific research and data. God, I've had to put so many footnotes in my edit from my publisher, but it's a whole bunch of evidence to say, here's all the benefits of doing it: financial, spiritual, physical, mental, right? All those things. The 4th section is how to give a shit, with a thing called the Give a Shit Kit. And it's a series of tools, right? You were working on acrostics earlier, RESBCT. Mine is power. So it's preface everything, open it up, wonder why, engage fully, and then, recap everything. So it's about how to be a better conversationalist with your staff or your customer. I think that communication is at the heart of giving a shit.
Yeah.
And then the last section is people who do. So right now it's about 25 stories, big or small, real life examples of people who have given a shit about, a person that's in front of them. And the whole thing starts with the big idea on page 1. And the page 1, it's the big idea in 3 parts. Number 1, according to Gallup, this is a real number. In 2024, there was $8.8 trillion in lost productivity due to disengaged employees. Part number 2, some of you who just heard that or read that don't give a shit. And part number 3, some of you are more upset than I said the word shit than the first thing I said. And so the whole preface of the book is I thought about calling it the lost art of caring, the lost art of giving a hoot, but none of them have the gravity of what we're talking about here. Trillions of dollars are on the table for people to get to grab and get a hold of. But we just don't seem to want to admit what it's really going to take. And that is us leaning in and committing. Am I in or am I out? Do I care or do I not? And if you're a leader and you're asking yourself that question, you're like, I don't really care. I'm not in. This ain't for me. Then just be honest about it and go figure out something else, because people need you to give a shit.
So what do you, I have so many different ways we can kind of angle this, right? When I think about giving a shit, right? There's situation 1, which is like you have people on your team and organization, some give a shit and some don't, right? Then there's people that you hire in, right? And it's like, cool, will they give a shit or will they not give a shit? And there's kind of like the 2 different angles that you can approach, which is like, hey, how do we hire people who do give a shit? And then how do we make sure people continue to give a shit, right? For you, what do you think if we had to choose one, what would solve the problem most likely, and how would we solve that problem?
Incredibly clear expectations of what that looks like. There are many people who get a job and they're still trying to figure out their login and figure out what the culture is at the office and who should I trust and who should I not. And they say, we're a family here. Let's define for everyone, if you're going to be on this team, what it's going to take. And I don't want it to be unrealistic. I don't want you working 12 hours extra every day or week. I don't want you to put yourself in an uncomfortable psychological situation. But every time a situation presents itself, it is a pass-fail moment for you to decide, are you in or are you out? So customers calling you and they have an issue. Do you give a shit? Do you care about it? And you just be blunt and honest and say, no, I don't really want to care today about what a customer wants. Then that's a problem. That's a struggle. So I think it's very clear expectations of what we're after. In this conversation about caring so much and trying to find the right people and all those things, I just think we have to be honest with ourselves and say, we can never, ever expect any employee to care more than we do as managers or leaders. And the other thing is, shout out to Gary Vaynerchuk, you can never expect your staff to work harder than you do because they do not get the piece of pie that you do.
That's right.
So just be that example. That's the other thing I would say is just give a shit and practice it every single day. They went to ChatGPT and AI and all these different versions of it and they said, what's the greatest definition of leadership? Every single one of them spit out the same thing, which is leading by example. So I think that we should look at the data and you just got to show up every day. So are you the first in the office? You should be. You're the leader, right? Are you showing up, in the best possible way? Are you caring about an employee's complaint less than you're caring about a customer's complaint? well, then you give a shit about the customer, but you don't give a shit about me as the employee. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say is, I think you mentioned a couple key things, which is number one, which is the model success as a leader. I mean, I think it's absolutely about your people are always watching whether you are aware or not, even this remote team. They're seeing how responsive you are, whether it's in Slack or email, to how, even when you respond, how detailed is it? Are you paying attention, right? To if you void them, like they know you don't respond. Like I still remember sending emails to certain people in my organization that did not respond when I needed their attention for something that was really important, right?
Yeah.
So people remember this thing, right? So they always remember. The second piece is it's the expectations piece. And I think that's wildly powerful. And I think that's why there's an older book. I think it's called The 7 Hidden Reasons Why Employees Quit or Leave, or something along those lines. Okay. It's like an older book. It maybe like 20, 30, maybe 40 years on. I don't remember now. But one of the reasons was a mismatch in expectations. And I thought it was really powerful. And that's everything from, income, the salary, to like the job description, to the culture, to everything, right? And one thing that was really critical for me is like, I took over sales orgs that went from like 50% down to like 19% turnover for like a sales org was pretty good, right?
Awesome.
And a big part was, there's many things, but one of the core components we did for new hires, because I also measured first year survival rate as well, and their speed to ramp time, is in the interview process, I would lay out crystal clear exactly what expectations were. Meaning, like I would literally show them what the perfect week looked like, how many hours, meetings they had to attend, to the job description or to the compensation, to what they could earn, if they performed and did perform, if they underperformed, to like the meetings we had, to my leadership style. I'll actually show them in a slide deck and see what their response was after each thing. Because if they're like, oh, I don't like that at all, I knew that could be an issue down the road. But they're like, I love this. I love the structure. I've been wanting this. Like when they're like salivating for it.
Yeah.
That's really important. And then
making them an insider.
100%.
Yeah.
We're just showing them. And then I think the other piece is like, when you give them that level of taste on top of that, it gives them a choice, right? They're going to be in or not. And then when you build your interview structure to uncover these things that are involved, a give a shit factor, you hear it in their answers. Yeah. Like you actually see like, how do they prepare, right? Or if you're like, hey, give me an example of maybe a customer situation you had where you made a huge mistake. What happened and how did you solve it? And you'll hear quite a bit to the level extent they'll go into to solve that problem, which could be hints towards, do they give a shit or not? So
probably.
I love it. I think we need more people who give a shit. My buddy calls it the gas effect, right? Give it, it's so critical.
I think if you look at Tony Hsieh's, he's now passed away at Zappos. Yeah. I don't know the exact number or time, but I've read the stories where they offer somebody $1,000 to quit after the first 6 months. And then they try again, I think at the 1 year mark with $3,000. And they're like, if you're out, that's okay. Yeah. And the crazy thing is, like, I've heard many managers, man, I'm not going to pay somebody $3,000 to quit my job. You're getting off cheap. Yeah. You're getting off cheap, man. Oh, yeah. Do it now. Otherwise, you're going to wait 3 years. You're going to fire slowly, and you're going to lose all this revenue. And you weren't even conscious that you lost it. Yeah. So we're right there. I also see the task-driven part of you. Yeah. And you're like this data and that data and the PowerPoint deck. That's why you're beneficial in that role, because you got the analytics, man.
You do balance of both, right? I've had great leaders who have punched me in the face in terms of like getting better at my social and self-awareness, right? Which is good to a certain extent, right? So I can be a better leader because like at the end of the day, when you're leading people, you have to win their hearts and minds. That's what it comes down to, Can't be all logic, it turns out. So,
well, Simon Sinek always says, why does nobody say winning minds and hearts? Because it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, it's exactly right. So powerful. I never heard that before. Great interview, Frank. People want to find out more about you, get a copy of your book. Where can they find you and get learn more about your book?
Yeah, my website is FTZINC. So it's me incorporated. Frank T. Ziede, so ftzinc.com. There's contact information on there, or on LinkedIn. You can find me. That's where I put all of my content on. But that's where the book will sort of come from, ftzinc.com. And probably won't be out until summer next year. I'm working with Page 2 Publishing, which has done a bunch of different, books in this field of business. And Off we go.
That's a wrap on this episode of the Revenue Vault. Now, if you got value, here's your next step. Go to venleyconsulting.com/teams to get a free performance scan of your sales org. We'll show exactly where deals are stalled and how to actually fix it. And if this episode gave you even one insight worth sharing, send it to a sales leader you respect. I'm Marcus Shan. Thanks for being in the room.